On the night of May 31st, 2009, an Airbus A330, Air France Flight 447, prepared for takeoff from Rio de Janeiro, bound for Paris. On board were 228 souls, 216 passengers and 12 crew members from 33 different countries. It was a routine, scheduled flight, one of thousands that crossed the Atlantic every single day. But this one would be different. This flight would vanish into thin air, sparking one of the most challenging and mystifying air crash investigations in modern history. What happened to Flight 447? How could a state-of-the-art aircraft simply disappear without a trace? The first few hours of the flight were completely uneventful. The plane climbed to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, flying smoothly through the night sky. The passengers were settling in for the long, overnight journey, some sleeping, some watching movies, others perhaps chatting with their neighbors. The cockpit crew, led by the experienced Captain Marc Dubois, along with two co-pilots, were monitoring the systems as they approached the vast, dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. At around 0130 UTC, the flight entered an area known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone. This is a region near the equator, notorious for intense thunderstorms and severe turbulence. It's a challenging but normal part of this route, and pilots are well trained to navigate it. The crew of Flight 447 made a slight course correction to avoid the worst of the weather, a standard procedure. Everything seemed under control. Then, things started to go wrong. At 0210 UTC, a series of automated messages began transmitting from the aircraft's systems back to Air France's maintenance hub. These messages, called ACARS reports, indicated that multiple systems were failing. The autopilot disengaged. The flight controls switched to an alternate, more manual mode. Key navigational and flight data displays in the cockpit went dark. In just a few moments, the pilots went from monitoring a highly automated flight to flying a massive jet. Manually, in the dead of night, inside a storm, with conflicting and unreliable information. Back on the ground, air traffic controllers in Brazil handed the flight over to their counterparts in Senegal. But Flight 447 never checked in. Hours passed. When the plane failed to arrive in Paris on schedule, the world began to realize something terrible had happened. A massive search and rescue operation was launched, involving ships and aircraft from multiple countries. But the Atlantic Ocean is unimaginably vast and deep. Finding a needle in a haystack would be an understatement. For 5 long days, there was nothing but silence and open water. The world watched, holding its breath. Families of the passengers and crew gathered at airports in Paris and Rio, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and dread. Finally, on June 6th, the Brazilian Navy found the first pieces of wreckage: a seat, a briefcase containing a ticket for the flight, and the aircraft's vertical stabilizer, floating hundreds of miles from any land. It was the heartbreaking confirmation everyone had feared. There were no survivors. But finding the wreckage only deepened the mystery. Why did the plane crash? It was a modern Airbus A330 with an excellent safety record. The initial automated messages pointed to a problem with the airspeed indicators, but that alone shouldn't cause a catastrophe. An experienced crew should be able to handle such a failure. To find the real answers, investigators needed the black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder. These devices were now resting somewhere on the floor of the Atlantic, in a rugged, mountainous underwater terrain, thousands of meters below the surface. The search for the black boxes became a monumental undertaking. It was an unprecedented effort, pushing the limits of deep-sea exploration technology. The first phase of the search lasted for months, but found nothing. A second, more advanced search was launched the following year, also ending in failure. Many began to believe the recorders would be lost forever, and the full story of Flight 447 would never be told. The mystery seemed destined to remain unsolved, but investigators refused to give up. They analyzed every piece of available data, from the recovered wreckage to the weather patterns, to narrow down the search area. Finally, nearly 2 years after the crash, in April 2011, a breakthrough. An autonomous underwater vehicle, methodically scanning a new, refined search zone, captured images of a large debris field. And there, among the twisted metal, were the black boxes. They were located and recovered in May 2011, almost exactly 2 years after the tragedy. The data they contained was shocking. The flight data recorder revealed the aircraft's final terrifying moments. It showed a catastrophic stall. The plane had lost aerodynamic lift and was falling out of the sky. But how? The cockpit voice recorder provided the chilling context. It all started when ice crystals, common in high-altitude storms, clogged the aircraft's pitot tubes. These are small external sensors that measure airspeed. With the tubes blocked, the airspeed indicators began giving false readings. This initial failure triggered the autopilot to disengage. The 2 co-pilots were at the controls, while the captain was on a scheduled rest break. Faced with unreliable airspeed data and loud stall warnings, the pilots became disoriented. The junior co-pilot, who had control of the aircraft, reacted instinctively but incorrectly. He pulled back on his side stick, raising the nose of the plane. This is the exact opposite of what you should do during a high-altitude stall. The correct procedure is to push the nose down to regain airspeed and lift. The plane began to climb steeply, losing speed rapidly. The stall warning alarm blared continuously, a loud, repetitive sound designed to be impossible to ignore. However, due to a quirk in the Airbus system's logic, the stall warning temporarily stopped when the airspeed dropped so low that the system considered the data unreliable. This might have added to the confusion. The captain returned to the cockpit about a minute and a half into the crisis. But by then, the situation was dire. The plane was fully stalled, descending at an alarming rate of over 10,000 feet per minute, with its nose pointed up. The final recording captured a scene of confusion and desperation. The pilots were struggling to understand what was happening to their aircraft. They never recognized they were in a stall. For 3.5 minutes, from the moment the autopilot disengaged until the final impact, the plane fell from the sky. The final words recorded were the captain ordering the co-pilot to push the nose down, but it was too late. The plane pancaked into the ocean surface with incredible force. The investigation concluded that the crash was a result of a tragic chain of events. A technical failure of the pitot tubes, followed by the crew's failure to correctly identify and recover from the subsequent aerodynamic stall. The findings led to major changes in pilot training worldwide, with a renewed focus on manual flying skills and how to handle high-altitude stall events and unreliable airspeed indications. It highlighted the complex relationship between human pilots and increasingly automated aircraft. The story of Air France 447 is a somber reminder of the unforgiving nature of aviation. It is a testament to the perseverance of the investigators who refused to let the mystery lie at the bottom of the ocean. And most importantly, it's a tribute to the 228 people who lost their lives that night, whose tragedy helped make air travel safer for everyone. Their memory lives on, not in the darkness of the Atlantic, but in the lessons learned and the lives saved since. Thank you for joining me on this look back at one of aviation's most compelling mysteries. If you found this story interesting, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into historical events. See you next time.